I've heard a rumor floating around for the last few years. Star Wars was a mess during filming and was saved in editing. It's a fascinating notion. Could one of the most beloved movies ever made be a product of clever editing? Was this movie pulled from the wreckage of a poor production, polished off, and made great in the editing room? To answer this, I'd first like to explore exactly what people mean by the words saved in editing. Often used examples are shots like these.
Quickly, to the doors!
That old man's mad.
You said it, Chewie.
This ship carries the crest of Alderaan. Was there any of the royal family on board? Who were you carrying?
These shots might be compelling examples of poor production or bad directing. Let's compare it with what ended up in the film.
Where are those transmissions you intercepted? What have you done with those plans?
We intercepted no transmission. This is a consular ship. We're on a diplomatic mission.
If this is a consular ship, where is the ambassador?
Apart from obvious differences, like replacing David Prowse's voice with James Earl Jones, we've also got stuff like John Williams' wonderful score, sound effects, and multiple cuts of close-ups. This scene is an edited scene. All these changes to the shot were intended to happen in pre-production. This shot is an unedited static shot of deteriorated film. To say that this shot was saved in editing, I think would be a little unfair. This entire scene was simply edited. Let's look at this shot from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Looks pretty dumb, right? Would it be fair to say that this was saved in editing? I guess you could also say Andy Serkis's performance in Lord of the Rings was also saved in editing. How about Jar Jar Binks? I guess you could say he was saved in editing too. That last one was a bad example. The point I'm trying to make is that this shot, or many of these shots that exist, are not evidence that Star Wars was saved by its editors. It's evidence that the editors existed. It's evidence that the editors did their job. I'd like to explore where notions like this come from. I like to think that this rumor didn't come from people watching B-roll of Star Wars and misinterpreting it. There are two reasons, I believe, why people say this. The first is George Lucas and the prequels. Now, there is enough talk on the prequels on the internet, and I don't much feel like adding anything to the pile. To be brief, the prequels aren't particularly good movies relative to the original trilogy. There's 100 reasons people dislike George Lucas, and that's fine.
George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our childhood. George Lucas raped our child.
However, because A New Hope is the only one film in the original trilogy that George Lucas directed, I think there is a want to take that away from him, to say that he was never really good to begin with. And the evidence is these unedited, completely out of context clips.
That old man's mad.
You said it, Chewie.
The second reason people say Star Wars was saved in editing is because, well, it was. Now, I realize this may sound like a complete contradiction, but hear me out. Star Wars did have a difficult shoot, and it was way over budget and late by the time it got to the editing room. John Jimson was tasked with putting it together in a short period of time. He was a very competent editor in his own right, and had edited films such as The Little Shop of Horrors and even Hitchcock's Frenzy. This edit of the film was considered a complete disaster. Jimson was fired and replaced with Paul Hirsch, Richard Chew, and Lucas's then wife, Marcia Lucas. It is their cut that we see today, well, for the most part. With enormous influence by George Lucas himself, the 1977 theatrical release is the cut Lucas wanted and had intended to release. So was Star Wars saved in editing? Few have seen the original cut, but it was said to be more traditionally cut. Now, having never seen it myself, I can't comment, but let's say it was a total disaster. Then at the very best, you can say that Star Wars was saved from one editor by other editors.